Okay, so I'll just recap a little bit on the beginning of the journey. So I was 30 years old, I had no spirituality in me, and I was working, I initially started life as a food addict, and that addiction had led on to workaholism in the stock market. And as the ego became more and more identified, you could say, or more and more loud, then dishonesty and selfish behaviours were arising at a very significant level. So right down into the pits of very, very strong ego. And at the age of 30, working in the stock market, and on a flight back from New York, the feet suddenly swelled up. I had to take my shoes off, and in London my mother was terrified, had a blood test done, and I was immediately sent to the Royal Free because I had kidney failure. So and it was and the doctors didn't know what to do to keep me alive, so they were taking lots of blood to the various departments in the hospital to find out what was going wrong. And literally, it seemed as if I was facing death, and with the rapid collapse of the kidneys. So it was like one day all is well, the next day facing death in a hospital bed, and it was a moment of great powerlessness. There was nothing in the addiction, in the ego. There was always something to do to get out of a situation, seeming illusions that you could choose to get out, but it seemed like all the escape routes seemingly had been cut off, and one was facing the end. And it was a moment of grace. It's probably the thing that, who knows what it was about, but probably it's what was required for waking up, that scenario. And a heavenly timeless, out of nowhere, a heavenly timeless stillness came out. It was so beatific and blissful. And there was a feeling, much like we had earlier, of wanting to stay in that for all eternity and not have to come back to this place again. It seemed like from that place it didn't seem like such a great idea to come back in here. But there was a message. There was a message in there, and the message was find a spiritual solution. And that was the only message that came in that timeless place. And then another thought arose about my parents and leaving them behind, and then that started the breaking of that timeless experience. But it was so profound. There was no spirituality in me before then. It was just ego, and all the externals, all the ego things that we learn in this world are important, not the spiritual. So before then there was none of that. But then it was almost like God had spoken, or some inner voice or some angelic thing had spoken, and it was a kind of a knowing. I didn't know how or where or what, that what would save me from the gates of death and hell was something spiritual. I had to find it. I always joke that I wish the voice had talked a bit longer, like exactly where to go to find the solution, and given me some exact directions. Yeah. Just said find a spiritual solution. So if I meet that angel or whatever it was on my inner voice, I say at least next time give me more directions. So I was absolutely certain. It was like a very profound spiritual, nothing like it ever. Electrified me, and I knew that was the way out. So I had a hope, but I didn't know where to go or what to do. And when I was released from the hospital, they managed to stabilise the kidney failure. Then started I was working the stock market, but they fired me pretty quickly because I was unable. I was just too exhausted. I went back to work for a short period of time, and I was exhausted. I had to leave. In the stock market, I was a workaholic, so I used to stay last person to leave, usually about 10 o'clock at night. I'd be the last person in the whole place, and that's a place of crazy workaholics. But I had to, I had no energy. I had kidney failure. I was under serious medical supervision, and I was just totally exhausted. And I felt like, if I lose this job, no one will ever offer me another job again. Because there wasn't much left in me. So anyway, I was the head of the analyst, the head of the analyst department, if you could sort of say that. But they could see I couldn't perform, and I was requesting to leave at 5 o'clock, which is just not done in that environment. Anyway, I won't say too much, but they hired someone to be the new head, and I was, anyway, that's a story for another time. But I had to leave that environment, and but I did, there was a bit of, anyway, there was a payoff, shall we say, and so that was it. I had this this payoff of £15,000, and I had a spiritual message, to find a spiritual solution, and I'd lost my job, and I had this sum of money. So I knew, it was like God had said that. So I have no clue where to find this spiritual solution. And for several years, it was like I was finding all these little, you can go to libraries and find these things, all these different types of spiritual groups you can go to in London, and buying magazines like Kindred Spirit, and contacting people. I saw somewhere spiritual healer. I thought, okay, well, hopefully this person can do miracles and shift the whole thing. So all kinds of things. So I met this lady who was a spiritual healer, then what's called the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. And I could, actually that was a spiritual experience. And I had the first spiritual experience, meeting her. I don't know whether I should, probably I won't mention her name. She was one of the top people in that organization, and she had put a little thing in Kindred Spirit at the back, spiritual healer. I thought, I need a miracle. And I saw her for the very first time, she, without touching my body, she was moving her hands just above my body. And I felt like spiritual energy run through me. That was like such a, it just shifted. How can someone just put their hand there and not touch me, and then suddenly there was this huge spiritual energy coursing down me? So I knew that was something beyond what I understood. I'd come from, my first degree was in science, then my master's was in business, so this world that was opening up was something that was like, I was being shown that there's another dimension to that which I was absolutely would have not even, I'd have probably laughed at anyone who probably said all of these things or thought they were insane or crazy. So I had that was spiritual. So I trained, one of the first, I went there, I trained as a spiritual healer, but that wasn't curing me. And then, obviously Reiki is a big thing. I met this lady who was also published in the magazine. I guess they got them from magazines, really. I thought if they're in magazines, they might be able to do miracles. Got this lady, and there was all I can say is I met the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this lady, was offering her trainings, which were quite expensive, so I spent several £100 on Reiki 1, then a few, then she said, oh, there's Reiki 2, so I spent a few more £100 on Reiki 2. Then I got the master attunement. Okay, that hadn't sorted me out yet. But then she told me about this Buddha attunement. So I said, okay, and that's a special one. That's going to be £400 for the Buddha attunement. So I thought maybe that one will do it. So I handed over the money for that one, and so that I would definitely feel the energy coming through. So I was hoping if I shoved enough money at her way, it would do it. And anyway, I'm cutting a long story short. But she did show her ego at a certain point, and I was very disappointed when I needed support. I can quickly share it. It was like my mother was in hospital, and I requested, I thought I'd spent all this money with her, and I thought she was a really, really, and she might be, could be my ego perception of the whole thing. It was probably my ego perception, but at the time, because I was not that advanced, she was, I think she was doing a show in what is the one that they do once a year, that's big spiritual... Mind, Body and Spirit. I think she was in the Mind, Body and Spirit, and my mother had a heart attack or something at the same time, and I requested her to come along, even after the thing, and give her some healing, because it was my mother, and she refused. Which I can understand, she was doing her thing there. But so that ended that, and at the time, because I thought she'd behave differently. And anyway, I'm going along. So I did a lot of things. I went to one. It's a quite funny. I won't mention it on camera, but one of those popular ones, a kind of a meditation thing, which is very, very popular. There are adverts for it. And there was a picture of a little Indian lady, and there was candles and things, and I just wasn't doing anything for me. So I was going out, and a person interrupted me, and I said, "No, I'm leaving." And the guy said, "If you leave here, you'll go to hell." So that was like, I wasn't quite happy with hearing that one. And but I did leave anyway. I didn't come back.
Hello, no.
Then there was. And I was like calling to God everywhere, like show me the right place to go. And I once was going up the escalators in Wood Green, and suddenly this man, this African man, ran up to me and said, I think something like, I can't remember the exact words, Jesus will save you, and he invited me to his church. And so I was going to this church. There were some lovely people there. And then one of the guys, in one of the talks they were giving, someone mentioned that this is the only church where you can find salvation. This is the only, and there was just such a strong reaction in me when I heard that. There was like a deep resonance of, this can't be right. Like, this is the only church in the whole world where I can find and I was so disturbed on hearing, everything was good until that point, but I was so disturbed on hearing that. So I asked to speak to the head, I guess the head, I don't know what you call it, head priest or whatever, I knew he was in charge, for a one-to-one meeting, and I had to, like, is that right? Like, and I said to him, like, it was said that this is the only church that, and it didn't feel right to me, and it's the only church in the whole, and I had to check, you mean this is the only church in the whole world, and that there isn't another church anywhere where I couldn't get salvation? And I had to ask him this question, because it wasn't sitting right. And he said, yes, that was the only church. So I couldn't go back to that one. There were lovely people. They kept calling me to come back, but I didn't feel that was the right place. Anyway, so there was all these different adventures with different places, and finally, yes, this was quite mystical as well. There was yes, it's the Mind, Body and Spirit. They give the magazine with what's happening with the events every year. And I got it one year. I got it one of the years because I was finding all these people to visit. And there was a page, I flipped through, and one of the pages, I was getting this mystical phenomena, would like glow. It just would like brighten up, for this page. And I saw it this year. It was called the Energetic Matrix Church of Consciousness, which is an American organization, which were doing a variant on radionics healing, and which is where you have like a photo and they send these vibrations to the photo and you get healing. Anyway, so I saw it one year and it shined at me, and I noticed it shined at me, but I ignored it. And so the next year, the same magazine came around again for the next year's events. I was flipping through and there was that advert again, and it shined again. It was like, oh, okay, it shined last year and I ignored it. And then this year the same advert's in and it was shining again at me. And I go, like, I didn't realise. I think that maybe God or the Holy Spirit thought I must be really dumb, so you probably have to do it. You have to wait till next year. So, but I did get it the second time when it shone. I got what was the message. I have to go, and I have to go to this stall in the exhibition. So, because I'd had that spiritual experience, I knew that something more significant was happening with this place, and. So I met a guy there. I think I met Hans at the stall. I met this East German guy, Hans, there, and I just knew I had to get involved with this organization. They were kind of like network marketing, so it doesn't sound that spiritual, but for some reason I had to get involved. And he said, "Look, we're doing this technology. There's network marketing involved." But so I said yes, because I just had these mystical experiences. I had to go. It so happened that Hans was a spiritual seeker. He had been around the world and was seeking out any teacher that claimed to be enlightened and spending time with them. So he had spent his whole life going around the world, in different countries, just sitting at the feet of different gurus or enlightened teachers. The list was, and this is like, how long ago is this? Is it 10, 12, 13 years ago, a long time ago, before a lot of these people were famous even. He had found them out. So he had been to Eckhart Tolle, he had been to, he had lived in the ashram with, I think, what's the guy with the big fuzzy hair? Sai Baba. He'd been around in Sai Baba's thing, then Eckhart Tolle, and various others. He would just spend lots of time with all of them. And he was in London now, and he was my kind of mentor for this organisation. And while I was there, the first thing he said was, one of the things he said, "Oh yes, I think the story is hilarious. It's hilarious how dumb I can be to signals." I think it is, So he gave me, but you must understand, I was very, very sick at the time. My ego was still very inflated. I had a lot of resistance to everything. And so one day he gave me a DVD, and he said, "Watch this." He said, "Watch this DVD." So I thought, okay, fair enough. I must say as well, one thing, every time I was in his presence, I'd feel happier. I'd feel like lifted up, and I was always like wanting to be in his presence, because I started to feel good. So I knew there was something about him. But anyway, he said, "Watch this DVD." And so I took it home, put it on, and it was a DVD of Hawkins, Dr. David R Hawkins. And as soon as he started to speak, I had what I now call a Kundalini experience. It was like a tingling and a bliss that was happening all over my body. I never experienced anything like it before. And there was like a non-verbal knowing at the same instant that was happening, that he would be my teacher. There was zero doubt. There wasn't any mentalization in that realization. He was going to be one of my teachers. Then, regrets. You hear some of my regrets. Anyway, so then Hans said, "Oh, Dr. Hawkins, he lives in America," and he said, Hans said to me, "Hawkins is actually giving a lecture in Oxford, and he's gonna drive all the way to Oxford, to see Hawkins." And I asked him how much the ticket was, and he said it was £5. So I said, "No, I'm not going." He was going to drive me up. I had just heard about him. I had the spiritual experience, but I thought at that time, £5. I think I was in so much scarcity at the time around money with my thing and my dwindling reserves. I thought, well, and I didn't really realise he's probably an American guy who hardly ever is in the UK ever, and that I'm getting a free lift to him. So I said, "No thanks." Like my dumbness is incredible even to me. So I said no, and I guess anyway I did say no. But I was attracted to Hawkins, and anyway that was that. But I think it's just nice to quickly mention. He said, there's another guy in London called Muji, who was very unknown at the time, totally unknown guy at the time, and they were going to, Hans was driving in his car with people from the group to go and visit Muji in Brixton. And Hans said, you should go, and I said, I'm not, I said I didn't want to go, and the reason was, I thought the name Muji sounded, I wasn't sure about the name at the time. Because I'm on camera, I won't go too much into that one. But anyway, so I was refusing. I refused Hans to go off and get a lift with Hans off to this teacher who said you must see in Brixton. Anyway, so I refused that the first time, and then after a week or two, there was another guy, Brian, in the group, and he said, no, you must come. We're going, you must come. And when I had the second endorsement from Brian, then I said, okay, I'll go. And I had spiritual experience when I met Muji, and he became, so those are my two teachers from many years back. I think, was it 10, 12, 14 years back. And they've remained the same. They haven't changed in all this time. They were given to me by Hans. Now with Hawkins, I started to order his work, his DVDs, and his books. And when I got his first DVD, and I started watching, I was like, I had to watch it over and over and over again. And I was noticing that things were shifting in my life very, very quickly. It was like miracles were starting to happen. I could feel that there was such immense power in just watching him over and over again. It was like stuff was clearing, miracles were happening. And there came the strong, at the time, because I had kidney failure and I was eventually on a dialysis machine, and he was an old man, and I was in fear of death, and for those of you who don't know my story, I had got kidney failure on an airplane. So I had an absolute phobia of ever going on an airplane again, because I thought last time on an airplane, 70% kidney loss, near death. So, the idea of going on another airplane ever again was like not appealing, because my head was saying death. You lost 70% in one flight, so the next flight you've got 30%, you're not going to make it. Anyway, but I was watching Hawkins over, and there was this great spiritual calling, and there was a voice saying, you have to see him before you die. I mean, before either I or he dies, because he's an elderly man, and I'm I'm facing serious health issues, and it was a great thing, but there was this huge aversion to getting on an airplane, to going off to Sedona to see Hawkins, and so I had the next best idea. I would invite Hawkins to the UK and I'd organise everything for him. And I sent that email off, and surprisingly they said yes. I can organise an event for Hawkins to come to London. And then they gave me contacts of people in the UK that were Hawkins fans. And I started organising it, and he's such a big name even then that, I spoke to alternatives. They said yes, definitely, when they saw his credentials published by Hay House, a serious heavyweight, College of Psychic Studies. It was all organised, and it was put on the website. So I've met people who had, had booked tickets to see him in London. It was all on its way. And then suddenly I got an email saying he's unable to come, and they're cancelling the event. So, after organising it, and he was going to come because I didn't want to get on an airplane, and it was all looking good, and it was organised, and it seemed that it was cut off. So then, it was like, the desire to see him was so great that finally decided to go. I said, I've got to see him before I die or he dies. And I got on the airplane, and there was great terror in getting on the airplane. And I was reading the Course in Miracles, actually. I was reading the Course in Miracles on the airplane, and it was very, very soothing to just keep reading. What was it? Something like nothing in this world is real, something along those lines, yeah. It's not real. And every time I read that, it's not real, I just get this quietening of the terror and the panic of am I going to suddenly collapse and lose my kidneys? And I got to the other side, and miracle after miracle happened. I remember getting to the, they have like a kind of a bus from Phoenix Airport to Sedona. And I remember going there and they said, oh yeah, you're just in time. The last one of the day was about to leave, so that was like a miracle. So I could feel the grace carrying me to him. And he talks about the grace of the teacher, the transmission of the grace of the teacher as being very, very important. And that was the reason I had to go. I had to make physical contact, shake his hands or something, because he says that grace of enlightenment, there is a physical transference in the proximity, in the aura of the teacher, and it's transferred, and it then means that the spiritual seeker has within them that energetic vibration which will help them to transcend all the barriers necessary to reach the same level as the teacher, the enlightened teacher. So I knew, and for me, my view was he was the highest enlightened teacher I knew. So it's like, well, if for reincarnation's sake, I don't want to keep coming back, and that will aid. And he said, actually, if you don't get that, I do agree with him. I mean, his view anyway. If you don't get that grace, if you've not had that grace yet, you're not able to get there. And so I got there and I shook his hands. I remember, I can't remember if it was the first visit or the second visit, but I was desperate. I shook his hands. I think the first time he came in and he was going around the audience and I shook his hands, and I'd heard in his DVDs and stuff that he had studied A Course in Miracles, and he knew, was it Gerald Jampolsky and the attitudinal healing, and he'd started up an attitudinal healing in, I think it's New York, and not only in his story did he lose 23 illnesses, many of them life-threatening, but people in that group that he oversaw had lost cancer, had disappeared, AIDS, myasthenia gravis, all these miracles, and I had kidney failure, I had gout. So it's like I knew that, from that hospital thing, that the Course in Miracles, I knew there was going to be the Course in Miracles, Hawkins and Muji had been given to me by God as my 3 avenues to getting off a dialysis machine, getting off the gout and everything, and all these physical symptoms and hellish things that were afflicting me. And that was the thing. It was the Course in Miracles and Hawkins' teachings, cancelling beliefs. God did not create cancer, so it is not real. Doing all of the lessons, listening to his works and Muji's works, self-inquiry. So when I shook his hands for the very first time, I think, in the audience, I knew, it was funny. He had one of the illnesses, of the 23 he had let go through spiritual work, was gout. And I had gout. I'd get these inflammation attacks. And when I shook his hands, I had this tingling in my toes. And I knew that was like a sign, that he used to have gout and he had transcended it and it was gone. And then, I had gout, and when I shook his hands, I had this tingling in my toes. And I knew it was also part of the transference of his grace. And luckily I got to meet him twice of that thing, because I went to a satsang and his lectures. We went for a week, a group of 3 of us. And so for the question, we met these lovely 2 guys who, one of the guys, because I was going to these 12-step groups, and I met in these groups one person who had studied Hawkins a lot, and I think met Hawkins, and was a very high, he was having all kinds of spiritual experiences. And anyway, I was worried about how to ask the question for Hawkins. I said, just ask Hawkins how to be free, something like, how do I become free of kidney failure, gout? And I thought, okay, so the question, how to ask the question was given me, and I asked him, and hopefully I'll play it to you guys at some point, or let you have a listen to it. But you know, I think he said a few things. He said he had gout, but that had gone, and then he talked about doing spiritual work, and then he said, you know, all of that should work, and if it doesn't work, I'll meet you on the other side. And I just had to laugh, because he was like, he couldn't take anything that I was saying seriously. He said, like, you know, do the spiritual work, and you'll either leave or I'll be there. And then I had to laugh myself. You can't. Hawkins has got such an infectious laugh that you know, you had to sort of chuckle and not take it seriously, like you're telling him, like, you know, you've got a mild headache or something, not that you're afraid of your life. So, but you know, I met him, and I remember, I think on that situation, at the end, you know, he was going to walk past and out of the thing, and people were asked to line up at the end, and so people could at least shake his hands. Everyone wanted to shake his hands at least once. So I remember getting in the front of the queue and getting another shake, because I don't even know I'd seen him, and got a photo with him, and then I'd run up to a little bit later on in the queue. I just stick my hand out and then share. I think I got several shakes. I had to make sure that I got a good dose of Hawkins. And you know, and I did, you know, I was doing the course and listening to him and Muji, and you know, the kidney failure, I got a transplant, which has been going strong for 6 years. You know, the gout left. You know, so all these miracles started happening. You know, and these things left. So it worked. You know, like the path towards Hawkins, and that what I realized is obvious, that so many times grace shows the way, but you're too dumb to see it. You see, too dumb. I mean, I don't know if I'd taken the first year and met Hans earlier, I might have got into. I mean, this is just hypothetical, but I might have got more into Hawkins and not said no to a free drive for £5. In the end, I had to spend over 1,000. I had to spend over. I tried to get him over here. That it was no. I had £5 in the UK, but then it was like, you know, over £1,000 to see him in, and the fear of things. So that's what happens if you don't follow the cues. But you know, I was also very blocked off at the time, so not able to. In terms of, like, if you're really interested in Hawkins' books and DVDs and stuff like that, I recommend, now, two of the books varying on how you want to go about it, either Transcending the Levels of Consciousness or Letting Go. Now, the Letting Go is his last book ever written, and it's really a practical book. It doesn't use the word God hardly, and lots of practical exercises, lots of him relating experience. So it's a very easy read, but also very, very good. So if you want a gentle but very, very informative start, I would recommend Letting Go, his last ever book. But if you're wanting to get something a bit more of your teeth into as a first book, I'd recommend Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, which is brilliant. And he goes through, you know, like we have the different levels, you know, from shame, guilt, apathy, fear, pride. So all the levels up, and then into the more esoteric levels, like courage, acceptance, love, and the peace of God, enlightenment. So he goes through and what are the blocks, and what are the typical blocks you face at each level, and how to transcend them. So it's like a roadmap, and what are the dualities at each level that need to be resolved. So it's I think it's a brilliant book. And so Letting Go is a more reader-friendly, a very lovely book for introduction. Transcending the Levels is also a brilliant book to get started with. Maybe a little bit more, will bring up a little bit more stuff with going through that book. You know, and after that, it's up to you really. You can his middle tier books. Middle tier books would be, well, you know, well you could. I've forgotten the name of it. It's.
The Eye of the Eye?
Oh yes, thank you. The Eye of the Eye. Thank you, Dimisha. Eye of the Eye is his middle tier book. If you want to get something more into Muji level, self-inquiry, there's Discovering the Presence of God Within, which is also a nice book, which is a bit more on the self-inquiry Ramana side of things. But you know, his most beatific and highest book, which is aimed at those people who are dedicated non-duality seekers, you know, at the very last levels, you know, but I think it can be read at any time if you have the inspiration to read it, is I, Subjectivity and Reality, which was, I remember the first time I read it, I got the book, because I just wanted the highest book first, you know, so I got that one, and I could only read like 2 or 3 lines and it felt like my head blew up. And I couldn't read any more for the day. You know, then I'd read another 2 or 3 lines and then my head would blow up again. So it was so like, it was like awe shock just to read it and couldn't get through it. So that happened. I mean, in the end, I could read it over and over again. But in the beginning, I remember it was just too much. But there was something deep inside that wanted to get through it and wanted to assimilate it because of for some reason. So those are the books. Now, also I'd recommend all viewers out there, we're lucky now in the UK, at that time I had to order it all the way from the States. Audible, which is an Amazon company, which audible.co.uk, or you can go to amazon.co.uk and just type in Dr David R Hawkins, and you'll see he's got lots of his lectures and also his stuff in audio download. You know, on Audible, if you go on for the first month, you get 1 download for free without any charge. Other than it's £8 every month, and you get 1 free download. So you can actually subscribe to Audible and get 1 free. The one I would recommend, there's 2 I'd recommend depending on where you're at. Nightingale Conant have done a compilation of all of his stuff. I think it's called Health. It's about 10 hours long. So you could get that for free and cancel within the first month. About 10 hours long. It's got a selection of all his good bits, and it has got, you know, how to feel out the feelings with, you know, shock or pain or stuff like that. So it's actually amazing value. You can even get it free. So that's one to get. If you're now, he has done one on for the Course in Miracles students, which is Giving Up Illness Through a Course in Miracles. It's one of my favourites, where he talks at a very esoteric, like normally for his talks he's speaking to audience who are not familiar with any spiritual work. So that's 99% of all his lectures are for people who are straight off the road with curiosity. But the Course in Miracles one is, I listen to it over and over again because he's using course language, and it's just at a higher vibration. I just felt things shifting, where I can see he's having to tailor his message, dumb it down a bit whenever he speaks on other things. So my personal favourite, because it's mind-blowing, is Giving Up Illness, and because he used to teach students of A Course in Miracles. Most of his lectures are not for Course in Miracles students, so you never get to hear the lectures he recorded. But that one is. And that was really just fundamental in giving up illness through A Course in Miracles. That was fundamental, I think, in giving me absolute hope that these illnesses could leave me through miracles. And all the revelations of the students there, and kinesiology, he talked about that and how he learned about kinesiology and the Course. In terms of the kinesiology and the Course, he was teaching A Course in Miracles in Sedona, and he had a huge amount of the populace, which is a very small populace, attending, because it just spread like wildfire, his lectures there. And then he was drawn to kinesiology by a guy called Dr. Diamond. So he attended a class of kinesiology, which is like, does everyone know what kinesiology? Okay, everyone knows what kinesiology. So he suddenly got the intuition that that can be used for everything, not just, is rat poison good for your organic tomatoes? You can just ask any statement of the universe and it will tell you the truth or the falsehood of that. Anyway, nearly every human being, if you get them off the street, more or less all of them, if you put artificial sweetener on their thymus and test their arm strength, they go weak with an artificial sweetener. And if you put an organic apple, they stay strong when you check their strength. And he was doing that regularly with his students, just to show the power of kinesiology, to show what's good and what's bad. And he was also teaching them A Course in Miracles, you see. And every week they'd put the sweetener on, and they would go, or whatever it was, sweetener on, they'd go weak. And then the organic stuff, and they'd go strong. And then one week, while they were doing the Course in Miracles, they wouldn't go, it was, I think, also another one was fluorescent lighting. They would go weak with fluorescent lighting, looking directly at fluorescent lighting. One week, he said, look at the fluorescent lighting, and students weren't going weak. They had been going weak all the previous weeks. And then he checked them out, and he said, look at the fluorescent light, and they would normally go weak just to show how powerful it was, and they wouldn't go weak. And then they weren't, of course, the organic, so they weren't going, they were staying strong with the organic stuff, but they were no longer going weak to the stuff that they used to go to weak with. And so he had to ponder that one for a while, and then he realized, he says, I think it was around lesson 76 of A Course in Miracles, and he realized that it was doing the course, they had stopped going weak to the external negative stimuli, which I mean everyone does. If you just check anybody all the time, like everyone goes weak to fluorescent lighting and artificial, and they stay strong with organic good stuff. But now they were no longer going weak to that stuff was out there in the world, and it was like, and so hence, and when I heard that, I could immediately felt the inspiration of like I'll religiously do the Course in Miracles, because I have serious ailments, I don't want them, and God was showing the path, the great power of kinesiology, and he's written books with calibrating. Everything has, of course, if you've transcended everything, nothing affects you. But while you're still affected by identification within duality, he's given you can have the calibration of a rave club, the calibration of a church, the calibration of classical music, the calibration of gangster rap music, So he got a scale of 0 to 1,000 using the exact same scale. He calibrated all of this and has written Truth versus Falsehood is a book of all his calibrations, thousands of calibrations, like music, like the 540, 0 is extreme ego, anything below 200 is in the ego levels, above 200 to 400 is like, is not in deep ego, but it's in the levels of integrity, but levels of ego. 400 to 500 is love, and 540 unconditional love, 570 sainthood, bliss, the siddhis, 600 enlightenment, and the levels of enlightenment up to 1,000 as well. So, I saw this, and he recommended Pachelbel. I'll say this on camera. The highest music he calibrated was Pachelbel to Alleluia Canon by Robert Gass, and that, and also Kyrie and Alleluia were at 700. He calibrated that at 700. So that was the highest one. Those are the two highest one he calibrated. Robert Gass, Omnamaya Shivaya was, I think, at 600, and I've got that as well. But Mozart calibrates at 540 unconditional love. Bach, Beethoven are around 510. All in the high 500s. Andrea Bocelli was about 530, I think. So obviously those are the things that were on my playlist now. And I still, still every day listen to, while I'm doing stuff, articles, whatever, or doing my newsletter, I'll be listening to Alleluia Pachelbel's Alleluia in the background, because it's at that level of 700. The Beatles are at 400. But once you see the calibrations, I mean, it's like, well, I want to go 700. I don't want to go at 400 and get synced into 400s. I mean, 400 is nice, but it's not 540, and it's not 700. Pachelbel's canon is at 600 on its own, but the Alleluia thing actually pushes it up to 700. So there was that. There was 12-step fellowships are at 540. Now this may upset some people, but anyway, the lessons, he calibrated the lessons of A Course in Miracles at 600, which is pure enlightenment, but he calibrated the text at 550, at a slightly lower, very slightly lower vibration to actually just doing the lessons. And hence, my daily lessons have been a regime with that, with Hawkins. And yeah. Do you have any questions? Or do you want me to put that off?
I don't mind. It's just really good to hear all about it. He's a very funny man.
Yeah, he's quite funny actually. He laughs at everything. Really.
I think in my first round, when you introduced me to his name,
yes,
I couldn't get past the laughter.
Yes.
I just thought, where's the substance?
Yes.
I couldn't see it. That coupled with the fact I couldn't find any material on him that was audible.
Yes.
But this time round, I can appreciate the humour, and I can connect with it more.
Yes.
How he says that it's divine, and how it's his way of separating his identity from all this. Just kind of like I'm understanding his laughter a bit more.
Yeah, no, I had trouble with that.
A lot of people would be put off.
I didn't find enough. That didn't bother me.
Oh
No.
Oh, not maybe not.
No.
I can't speak for a lot of people then.
No.
Because he could barely get through one sentence
Without yes.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean,
Didn't bother me.
because I had the spiritual experience, I knew he was going to be my teacher. But I think, when I was listening to him, I mean, everything was a joke.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
And he, like he would like say he had 23 illnesses and they're all gone. He'd be laughing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
so it's like.
It seemed a bit dismissive to me at the beginning.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have that serious tone that a lot of teachers may have, and it's actually now I find that quite refreshing.
It is. It shows
Yes.
what an advanced level he's at.
I think so. Yes.
He's an extremely advanced
I think
level.
that's it,
Is
yeah.
that he finds it very difficult even to remember how awful it was at that time. So he just laughs. He said he had to write down his illnesses just to remember them when he was talking. So